Hello and welcome back for this week's video rant in my series, The Greatest Record Ever Made. I'm Carl Caffarelli. I'm the co-host of This Is Rock and Roll Radio with Dana and Carl, heard every Sunday night from 9 to midnight Eastern, here in Syracuse at WSPJ Spark 103.3, 93.7 FM, and on the web at sparksyracuse.org. I'm also a writer, and I'm working on a book called The Greatest Record Ever Made, Volume 1, dedicated to the notion that an infinite number of songs can each be the greatest record ever made, as long as they take turns. A few weeks back in the spot, we talked about the Sex Pistols and God Save the Queen. Now, talking about the importance of that song in my appreciation of punk rock. In the spring of '77 was the spring of my senior year in high school. I started reading Phonograph Record magazine, tabloid that came out monthly, and that hooked me on the idea of punk rock. And then in the summer, WOUR FM out of Utica played God Save the Queen, the then new Sex Pistols single. And bam, life-changing event. The first punk rock song I'd heard and embraced. But there's an asterisk to that, because before the Sex Pistols and even before Phonograph Record magazine, the first notion I ever heard of this broad category of punk rock, new music, whatever you wanted to call it at the time, was Patti Smith. Patti Smith was interviewed in the, I think, April 1976 issue of Penthouse magazine. And although I was only 16 at the time, 7-Eleven clerks really didn't care how old you were if you were buying an adult magazine. They didn't care. It was a different time. And I read the interview. I was interested, intrigued by it. I know that some other Penthouse Raiders did not share my interest in it. Patti Smith made some disparaging remarks about singer Helen Reddy. And I recall sometime after that, Penthouse magazine printing a letter from a disgruntled reader complaining about Patti Smith daring to say something bad about Helen Reddy. The things you remember decades later. So technically I heard of Patti Smith before I'd heard of the Sex Pistols or the Ramones or punk rock, before I'd seen Phonograph Record magazine. Also before Phonograph Record magazine, sometime in, I think, 1976, not exactly sure, I should look up the date, the Patti Smith group was on Saturday Night Live with Ron Nesson. President Ford's press secretary was the guest host. President Ford himself appeared in, I think, a couple of video introductions live from New York. It's Saturday night. And I'm sure I saw that. I do not remember seeing Patti Smith on there, even though the Patti Smith group was on that show. They did, I think, Gloria and The Who's My Generation. And I have no memory of that, so that doesn't count. I saw it sometime after the fact, but I don't remember seeing it when it was first on. But I did hear Patti Smith before hearing the Sex Pistols. In between Phonograph Record magazine and hearing God Save the Queen on WOUR in the summer. Sometime in, I think, April of 77 rather. Sometime in there, the Patti Smith group was on the Mike Douglas Show. Daily talk show that had occasionally some really cool musical guests. The Kinks were on there. Frank Zappa was on there sometime before that. John and Yoko were on there with Chuck Berry. So, an interesting mix of old and new, old school and new school entertainment. And the Patti Smith group was on there. And I remember watching them. I remember Patti Smith from the Penthouse interview. And they did Ask the Angels. And I thought it was horrible. I absolutely detested it. I turned the show off and I didn't watch the rest of it. A year later, I would love the song. But at the time, at the age of 16, before having heard the Sex Pistols, it was just noise to me. It did not appeal to me at all. Times change. As I embraced punk rock, fueled by Phonograph Record magazine, fueled by hearing the Sex Pistols, fueled by my interest in the Ramones, this group I'd never heard but was just endlessly intrigued by. I couldn't imagine how wonderful they must sound based on their description, and how much they lived up to that hype when I finally did hear them. Patti Smith was part of that. The first Patti Smith recording I ever owned was on Blue Oyster Cult's Agents of Fortune album. She sang on the track The Revenge of Vera Gemini. I don't have it in front of me, but I think that was the Revenge of Vera Gemini. That was the first Patti Smith track I ever owned myself. But the real icebreaker for me with Patti Smith was a video clip that played on Saturday Night Live about her talking about her cover of Van Morrison's Gloria. Now, Gloria, of course, I remembered from the 60s. It was a hit here in the States for a Chicago group called the Shadows of Night, written by Van Morrison and originally recorded by his band Them, which was not a hit here. I remember as a kid hearing the Shadows of Night's version and thinking they were singing Gloriaski. I was a stupid kid. I don't know how I lived to be 60 years old. Gloriaski. I don't hear it now, but I heard it then. But this video promo wasn't a promo of the song. It was her talking about the song that appeared on Saturday night. It had that opening line. Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. And that was like a door opening. I can't explain why, but it hooked me. And all of a sudden, I was really interested in hearing more. And I finally did hear it, I think, on WBSU, the campus radio station in Brockport State, my freshman year, the fall of '77. And I was fascinated. I developed the interest in Patti Smith. There was a girl in my dorm, I can't remember her name, who was a big Patti Smith fan. And she, of course, was always extolling the virtues of Patti Smith. I tried to hook her on television, who was certainly part of that same gestalt. And she wasn't. She thought television was okay, but no Patti Smith. No. So Marquee Moon was not for her. Patti Smith's cover of Gloria, it's actually a medley. She takes the Van Morrison song and grafts it together with her own rant in Excelsis Deo. And it is just fascinating. It may be the single most interesting cover I've ever heard. And that's saying something, because I love cover. There's been a lot of cover versions that I like. This is such an audacious recording that she seemingly effortlessly mixes her poetry with this British invasion punk from the 60s. This Irish punk, Van Morrison, when he was relevant. And it's just magic. I listen to it, and every time I listen to it, I think this is the greatest record ever made. Yeah, I know there's more than one greatest record ever made. We pick one at a time in its infinite turn. And every time I hear Patti Smith's Gloria, I'm just blown away by its accomplishment, its ambition, and the way that it achieves its goals. Much later, I got the album, Patti Smith Horses. I got Radio Ethiopia, which had Ask the Angels on it. I got Waves sometime later on. I don't recall, actually, if I ever owned a copy of the Easter album. I did have the 45 of Because the Night, which Patti Smith co-wrote with Bruce Springsteen. And I just loved that song. And I liked her cover of the Byrds' So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star. Gloria, man, that's just an incredible record. An incredible record. I don't think I'm ever going to get tired of hearing it. And if that's not a hallmark of the greatest record ever made, I don't know what is. Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. Ding dong, ding dong. Thank you for joining me this week on the greatest record ever made. Below you'll see options to support and subscribe. I will also include a link to the published chapter about Gloria that will be in the book, The Greatest Record Ever Made, Volume 1. Next week, we're going to take a departure in this series because it's time to do a Christmas song. There are no Christmas songs in the book, so I guess I better write a chapter, and then we'll talk about it. Who sings this Christmas song? Well, here they come, walking down the streets. They get the funniest looks from everyone you meet. Thank you for joining us on The Greatest Record Ever Made.